Note: countries are still a thing, but they tend to work together more now, and there hasn't been a world war in 100 years. Torch deck, B3, magazine entry hallway. 6 months after Pulse. Donovan sighed and restrained himself from rubbing his eyes. The radiation flash from the man's arrival was strong enough for his artificial eyes to pick up from the armored bulkhead of the ship. It had taken a slight overload of his neural interface to determine the ID of the strange individual who popped into the ship, and now he had a splitting headache. Turning towards the other 3 guards in the room, he grimaced. "I'm going to the medical office to get checked for RADs and check up on our patient. All of you should take precautionary pill R1 for brief but intense radiation exposure. I'll give you more information in a few hours." The head guard nodded. "Understood." With that, he took the elevator and was gone. 3 days later. "Finally, I have them all. Now I just need to escape the facility. Just need to backtrack a bit to evade the hit squads. There, an opening." He ran towards the light, towards freedom, and took off with his rocket-assisted jetpack. Gaining altitude, he felt the incredible force of air trying to force itself against him as he broke the sound barrier. Blasting through the sky, his HUD implants showed 5 jets on an intercept trajectory. He needed more speed. Flying higher and higher, he could see them falling behind as his rockets blasted him into space. Looking at his hand, his recently liberated gauntlet of energy drinks was glowing with incandescent energy. "Awaken, master of the 6 infinity monsters!" With that, Kyle jolted awake. The last thing he remembered was a bright flash, 1,000 pinpricks of light appearing through his closed eyes. Propping himself up on a pillow, he winced in pain. Looking around, he saw another man on the bed next to him, hooked up to machines, and some butler-looking dude who was blindfolded for some reason. Despite this, the man seemed to be looking directly at him as he got on a handheld device. "Captain, he's awake." A minute later, a stern-looking man walked into the room and stood next to the bed. "Thank you, Donovan." Dismissed. "Very good, sir." After he left, a silence permeated the room, drawing itself out unnecessarily. The captain took off his hat. "I'm Captain William Robert Monger of the Soul Navy. Would you mind explaining how the hell you got here?" My name's Kyle Schmidt. I don't really know exactly how I got here." The captain sighed, picked up a tablet from a table, and shook his head. "I'm going to explain the situation at hand. A huge explosion was seen in space north of the moon. At the same exact time, you teleported into my ship, breaking into a high-security area, and," he pointed to the man on the bed next to him, "giving one of my men acute radiation poisoning. I want to know, from you, what happened." Kyle looked away, a bit guiltily. "Well, okay. Basically, I was working on a project to brute force warping objects around the solar system, for a video I was working on." "And you thought it would be a good idea to break into a military ship?" "No, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I was just going to send a small camera with a blinking light a few 100,000 kilometers away from the ship to get your attention." The man crossed his arms. "Are you aware of the dangers of warp travel? It's 6 orders of magnitude harder to create a working device which can warp physical matter than the ones we used for communication. Any matter which is contained by a warp channel, if it terminates before it's designed to, gets converted into pure energy. You're lucky you didn't become one with the goddamn fabric of the universe." The captain straightened his uniform and sat down. "Now, explain what happened." "Okay, after I made the warp laser video, I suddenly came into a significant amount of money. In my garage, I was already working on a prototype which should have been able to warp solid matter around, but I needed a safe location to test it out, so I rented a place on the moon to do experiments where I could point the system into space without an atmosphere in the way. As for the actual prototype, basically it draws energy from using 2 small warp drives pointed at each other to compress around 50 grams of hydrogen to the point of fusion. Both of those are sheathed within a larger warp field, which is able to harness the energy coming out of the point where the 2 smaller fields interact. I programmed it to automatically compensate for changes in launched mass and change in velocity by changing the amount of hydrogen fused in the warp. Once it was complete, I bought a ship, took it into space, far away from everywhere else, and was getting ready to fire it. The last thing I remember was putting the camera on its stand on the station, then a blinding static of nothingness which persisted even after I closed my eyes, then a flash. Then I woke up here. The only thing I can think would cause this is if I was standing in the path of the warp beam when it started, and the field containing the hydrogen must have overloaded and destabilized instead of being a controlled release. Kyle looked at the captain, who was looking at him intently. After a few seconds, the captain sighed, rubbed his face, and leaned over to hit a button on the table. I don't even know what to do with you right now. You're lucky the crew didn't shoot you on sight when you popped in here. You've likely progressed warp technology by 10 years, but at the same time inadvertently caused a massive shitstorm to go down on Earth. You've got 1 billion people who think it was awesome, and 1 billion people who want you arrested. The captain looked thoughtfully for a few seconds. Well, George will survive, and I don't want to squander this opportunity. You're going to share knowledge with both us and the Quartians, and work with our science team in order to make warp safer. Considering what you've done, I think that you'd make a valuable asset to the team. We're going to reach Titan in less than 5 months now, so it might be a while before you ever get home. Any questions? Kyle asked hesitantly. Am I allowed to record videos on the ship? If it's not classified, we won't stop you. However, you will not release footage on how to assemble matter-capable warp fields. All footage that leaves the ship is going to be reviewed before it gets off. Now, I have a job to do, but you'll be briefed in a few minutes. The captain left the room. A minute later, a tall American with crew-cut brown hair and eyes, and a stout Russian man with buzz-cut short blonde hair and blue eyes walked in. I'm Ivan Kier, ship's medic. You've slept for 3 days due to extensive injury after exposure to vacuum for 49 seconds. Somehow, radiation didn't harm you, but did harm him. He pointed to George. You're both lucky to survive. Looking at the charts, he handed Kyle a bottle of pills and continued. I release you from medical bay. These are for pain. If you start hurting, take no more than 2 pills with every meal. Come back tomorrow for checkup. He nodded to the American. Howdy, I'm Communications Officer Dave Davidson. I'm actually a fan of your channel, by the way, so it's nice to meet you. Now, basically, we've been working with the Quartians over the last month in order to improve our tech, but warp is inherently dangerous, so we didn't exactly share how to create it to the public. I honestly find it incredible that you managed to get it to work without killing yourself. Anyways, it shouldn't be a problem to converse with the Quartians. We've made a pretty good translating software for people who don't want to learn the language. But if there's any unclear words, just ask for clarification. We're going to head up to the comms room when you're ready. As Kyle tried to get up, he realized just how sore everything was. Oof, my blood hurts. Yeah, that sounds about right. By the way, I'm pretty sure you broke a few records. First man to break the light barrier, longest time spent in vacuum without dying, and the first man to break into a nuclear weapons facility that didn't have a door propped open. I guess that's pretty rad,